Welcome to Spy Satellites, a podcast about Dune Imperium and the people who play it. I'm your host CJ, and this is Rotation 14, where we're discussing special modifications to upcoming Dune Imperium competitions. So join us, why don't you, for a roundtable discussion focusing on cards, combos, atomics, and everything spice. If you like what we do, please give us a like and subscribe, and if you'd like to support us, you can do so on Patreon at patreon.com/hiddenassets. Supporting us helps us continue to produce quality content and gives you access to some pretty awesome perks, including voting for the upcoming podcast topic. So tell your friends and let us know how we're doing. We're always trying to improve the quality of our content, and we can't do it without you, the listener. Orbiting Arrakis with me is a man who needs no introduction, but I'll do it anyway. He referees for a living, and his milkshake brings all the boys to the yard, our very own Black Shadow.
I don't think anyone has ever told me that before, and I'm not sure how to respond to that comment. Howdy everyone, hopefully you are well. Greetings and salutations. I will say that this is, just take a step back, and this is now weekly, regular, episodic content from Hidden Assets. What a world
we're doing
we
our
live
best.
in.
I know.
Making the things happen.
It's weird. So the one thing I want to say to all y'all who are listening out there is that because we're doing this more frequently, the quality of the content might have dropped slightly. Say that because we're forcing this through. It's just a preface to say, like, if we're doing this a lot more frequently, there might be a little bit less to talk about. The episodes will be a little shorter, about an hour is what we're, I think, aiming for. But that said, we still try to do the best we can. But that's just how it is. It's the more you do, the quality goes down slightly, and I've seen it with other board game podcasts.
The more we do, the better we get. We got
more. Oh yeah, you think so?
Talk us up, for goodness sakes. We're trying to sell ourselves here. We need the money. We need the money.
Yeah. So okay. In any case, today our topic, as voted by our Lands Red Council, is about what we're planning to do for our upcoming competitions. That also includes things we'd like to see in upcoming competitions that either we ran or someone else ran or whatever, just things that we'd like to see. So one of the main features of this channel, and if you've been following along for a long time, you know this, is that we have these sort of small pot tournaments for Dune Imperium where upwards of 200 players from around the world are challenging each other for best of the best, title of the best Dune player in the world. And we've run several of these now, and we're going to keep doing them because we love doing them. We know you love them, and yeah, they're fun. So
eat your heart out, World Series of Board Games.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that we run better tournaments than them, but we have better competition. I will say that.
I mean, considering, but for the record here, we are going to be jumping a bit between like Dune Imperium, Rise of Ix, Uprising sort of stuff. To be fair, when we've talked about this before, obviously the competition we held in person over in North Carolina at an undisclosed location for the Uprising tournaments. We have had players there who have participated in the World Series of Board Game. Indeed, yes. Was it the second one? I think it was. We had that year's World Series Board Game champion for Dune Imperium, who enjoyed himself. And I remember speaking to him after that as saying, what do you rate the difficulty of this competition to what you saw it in Vegas? He was like, this is a different level. You're damn right.
Yeah, it is a different level. I mean, when you get the players who jam games all the time together, it's just going to be like that level is just kicked up a notch. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with the World Series of Board Gaming at all. Nothing wrong with that. But the fact of the matter is you have to get on a plane, you have to book your ticket, book your hotel, go to Las Vegas, and then play there. And not everyone can do that. I mean, it's one day maybe it'll get there, but I think right now we're still kind of on the edge of that cutting floor, the best of the best.
I mean, it's just pure reps. Like, we've got people that have played legitimately quadruple hours of this game played. And that is complete madness. I mean, to be fair, if I think of all the time I've put into Dune Imperium, if I'm trying to exclude like commentary, although that does add into it, I'm probably not too far off at this point, which is a frightening prospect to consider. But like we have some absolute, just like some serious players that would give anyone a run for their money, pretty much anyone in the world, and that's why we got started out for the North Carolina competitions. We got a load of folks over there for it, so I think the proof is there. But anyways, I think we're digressing a bit here.
Yeah. Let's get to the topic because I have a lot to say, and I think you do too. Let's start with what we're working on, maybe, where we can say something about that. So, what I'll say, and then there's going to be some things here that we can't say because they're not obviously set in stone yet, but we have been working on a new Dune Imperium Digital X tournament and how that might look. We're still like in the planning stages of that, and there are a number of reasons. Do you want to fill in on why that is, Shadow?
Yeah, as best we can. Obviously, this is a fun topic for me because like I'm the competition guy who sets it all up. We obviously have had the release of the Dune digital app that first came out about, I don't want to say a year ago, about like sort of 8 9 months. I think exactly when it was about the start of the year. I can't recall exactly. But over the course of time, that has seen obviously a lot of development. That is Direwolf's own physical app rather than doing stuff via third pilot we have done with Tabletop Simulator. And I do think overall the reception for it has been pretty positive. It has had some kinks it needed to work out, and then Rise of X got released about 6 weeks or so ago, I think at this point, maybe a couple of months. And admittedly, there was some things that needed to be fixed when that first came out. Nothing's perfect, but that did have to be addressed. But it is in a pretty good state now. There's a couple of things that aren't quite the same as rules are written, I suppose, but they're fairly minor things. But I think the main thing to note is that, and I've said this since the start, I do think it is a decent platform for playing Dune Imperium in any form. I know it doesn't have quite like all the content that say we have available to us on Tabletop Simulator, for example. And I've always said Tabletop Simulator, we're very grateful for the work that's gone into that. And we're very lucky to have access to all the content that's ever existed for the game just there, and it is pretty wild. And it's kind of helped get it's played its part in where the game is today. And I don't think anyone could really dispute that. And I suspect if you ask Paul Denon and co. very quietly, they'd probably nod and say, "Yeah, you know what, it has helped." And perhaps they've alluded to as much before. But Tabletop Simulator does have its limitations, ultimately. And in amongst of us, like with Doom Digital's now coming out, we've been streaming both Uprising on TTS and, say, Doom Digital with Base and then Rise of X. And quite frankly, the numbers suggest that you guys are more interested in watching stuff on the app, probably because it's just easy to see what's going on. And that's just the truth of the matter. And that's kind of why a lot of our content has recently been focused on the app. The numbers are just on that side of things, and I don't think that's a huge surprise to either of us, truthfully. But being able to do something as well, I think, directly on their app, I think is better in the long run for everyone as well, because it allows us to kind of, do something a bit more properly in a way. Not to say that we haven't done with TTS, for example. But I do think there are a lot of potential benefits of doing that. It just feels a bit nicer. And it's also a nice way for us to try and give some more direct support towards the developers of the game that we all play.
100% agree. And this is something that I think is just going to benefit the community. The app makes everything so much smoother. The presentation is really crisp. This is something that will bring more people into the game and you'll get them playing. I mean, if we get tons of people for our first Dune X tournament, I mean, I think that that's just like, on the long run, it only helps Direwolf with their own sort of like, promotional aspects and things like that. But, I just think that it's just the best way to do it, honestly, even though TTS, has a special place in my heart because obviously we started doing all of our comps and everything on TTS. It's a flexible, albeit a little bit finicky program, and I like it, but also I don't want to use it anymore. I'm kind of done with it. The one thing I'll have to say is that this is no shade against any of the people who have worked very hard on the Dune app or mod rather for TTS. I think they've done a wonderful job. It's just merely I think that the barrier of entry for players is a little high, and I would rather get more people into the game if possible and make it easier for them to enjoy it.
Yeah, I think digital is it's more accessible, it's more streamlined. The games are quicker overall. I think everyone could admit to that. Like on digital, you're probably shaving like at least 10, 15 minutes off every match that you play, which is quite a lot when you think about it percentage wise. And yeah, obviously, we've obviously got good relations with us alongside with a TTS Club, with their Discord
Yep.
server. We do obviously all of our matchmaking via TTS is still done via them with a good partnership and a moderator for that for their Discord now as well. And it's really nice to have had that relationship. But I've always said for quite a while, way before digital even happened, that some point down the line, Direwolf are going to bring out their own app for this game. It's inevitable. They're just gonna do it. They've done it for enough games. I was surprised I hadn't done it sooner for doing Imperium, and that once it does come out, and once it goes through some development, a little bit of tweaking and fixing, and a bit of UI adjustment, and once some of the content comes out, that eventually the stuff that we do is going to start kind of moving over towards that because it's just a much more proper way of doing things. And let's say nothing will take up the hundreds of hours I've played on TTS playing Dune Imperium, but I still get it nowadays. I speak to newer folks that are come to me with questions about this and that and find it's a bit awkward. And of course, with TTS, if you go ahead and break a rule, that's a problem because you can't do anything about it. There's no protection of rules in that because it's just
Yep.
it's a sandbox and you make of it what you will. At least with Dune Digital, like the rules are enforced. You can't do things stupidly. You can't take things out of turn. You can't forget features. I mean, you think back to like when Immortality first came out, and the amount, and it still happens. The amount of time people forget to take their research, it happens
Yeah.
all the time. We've all done it hundreds of times, probably at this point, if you played enough games, and you just keep doing it because it's off to the side, and you're doing so much. And then you think to actually like, oh, I was going to do my research. Can I do this? And it's just like it's not ideal. So and that causes its own issues. So that is, I think it's a not an unreasonable way to go. I have had a few folks that have spoke to me as well, on streams and direct messages asking and saying they were interested in using digital for a full official tournament. And it just seems a natural way for us to at least test the waters and see how we go. It's possible it might completely flop. It's not impossible. And admittedly, there are some things that probably need some adjusting for us to do it a
Yeah.
bit more properly, which is, I think, where we're going next here.
Yeah. I definitely think we should talk about that. But before we move on, I just want to say that there are, pluses and minuses for Tabletop Simulator versus the app. I think, even though you don't have rules enforcement so much, you can take back things a lot more easily if things get pretty hairy, or if there's a mistake or a bug, you can fix those things. Whereas in digital, if something goes wonky, you really have no safety net, and that's another thing that we're going to talk about in here in a second. So, the first thing I wanted to talk about regarding if we did an X tournament on Dune Imperium Digital is the things that we as commentators and hosts would need, right? The first thing for me is that we'd have to have a spectator mode. It makes sense. We don't have a spectator mode. There's no way for somebody to come into a game and watch it,
Hmm.
which
I
is I
don't.
think pretty essential.
As I say, I don't know. I don't have a huge amount of experience with a lot of other of Direwolf's digital apps. I don't seem to recall them generally having that feature. I don't know how many games really do have that sort of feature. Tabletop Simulator might be
No.
somewhat unique in that sort
Yeah, I
of
mean,
situation.
there's well, I mean, there's some game. There are definitely games that have spectator modes. I mean, you can play like Twilight Struggle. You can go spectate that game. Like I'm pretty sure you could spectate in Through the Ages. I mean, all really well made
You would know
apps,
better
not
than
by
me, honestly.
DID, but no, I mean they're not by Direwolf, but the same thing is. I mean, they are. It's capable of doing them. And everything on Board Game Arena has a spectator mode, and that's browser based, of course. So there are different barriers when designing these, but I just think that's become kind of an industry staple for being able to watch and take in these great players play and then see what they do and kind of like incorporate that into your own play. So I think that that's something that's needed, very very needed. I mean, there's no way we can host a tournament that we can't commentate if we can't commentate the game. So
It
that's one of
does
the
defeat
first things we
itself,
have to
yeah.
have. Yeah. The second thing for me, and one of the I think is an essential thing for a tournament mode is being able to adjust the turn timer or turn it off. Right now, it's 90 seconds, I think,
Yes.
for your turn to complete your turn. There's a couple of things that are getting in the way of this. First of all, if a tooltip pops up for some reason, like maybe you're booting up a fresh copy of Dune Digital just because you're on a laptop somewhere else, you have to go through all of the tutorial things. They will pop up, and that 90 seconds keeps ticking away while you're doing that. There's no way to stop it. Also, if you have animations on, even faster animations, but animations nonetheless, those interfere basically. There things are happening, animated things, while the time is ticking away. So you don't really have 90 seconds. You have something more like maybe 75,
Mm.
maybe. And it's really not that much time, especially when you get into rounds 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe. And when you do that, you've got many more combinations of things. You have to trigger things, and the interface sometimes gets in the way a little bit. So you have to have just a little bit more time. I just watched Bludgeon stream today. Today is Sunday, the 15th. And he was streaming, and he ran out into this exact same situation where he was trying to ship, get all the things from shipping, buy a tactile, trigger the tactiles effect. Like he couldn't do it all. It was just
Yeah, yeah,
impossible,
and
you
I
know.
can attest that as well. That we've obviously I do some streams as well, and there are times where 90 seconds is really pushing, especially if you're playing like Tessia Vernius and you're shifting.
Yeah.
The one I always bring up is Sonic Snoopers. I always bring up Sonic Snoopers because if you're changing a load of intrigues, you've got to go into your tactile, you've got to choose it, you've got to choose all the intrigues, they got to be discarded, which happens one at a time. Then they get given to you one at a time. Then you got to look at them, you got to work out what you're gonna do. I mean, if you there was a stream back on Tabletop Simulator, for example, where I used Sonic Snoopers for like 6 or 7 intrigues. I went to secret, stole
Wow.
intrigue from everyone, and then Sonic Snoopered like 7 out of my 8 intrigues. You could never do that and and do it in enough time on Doom Digital. You just couldn't. And there's
No.
nothing illegal going on. That's not like spending time and like time wasting like that. That's just physically it's it's just so much happening in such a space of time. You just can't do it. It would be impossible to do without timing out, and then having the AI do the rest of your turn, and you don't know what it's going to do because sometimes it does pretty wild stuff. So, and I know that this is something that comes up. It's been mentioned on their Discord. It's been mentioned on BGG and probably somewhere other places as well. It's been mentioned on our videos that yeah, 90 seconds. I think base game is probably okay, but for Rise of X, it needs to be probably more. And again, I think of a world like if you're playing XMO and like you're grafting cards and doing this stuff, 9 seconds is never going to be enough. It just
No.
isn't. There's no way. So there has to be. I think there's been enough talk about it. I would be fairly confident that whenever we are still waiting at this point in time recording for the update for the rank stuff and everything else come from they have noticed that they are behind. I think it's very possible that something around turn timer is coming with this as well due to the fact it's been delayed a little bit, and that is my ultimate guess because yeah, 90 seconds is not too enough. But then what do you change it to, I suppose, is the question.
Well, I think there's a couple options here. So if you're making a game where it's just people come in and play, maybe you have a set number of times you can set per turn. Like maybe you have like a base 90 seconds, you can bump it up to 120 or I don't know, 180 or something like that if you really want to. Or maybe if you're playing with friends, like maybe there's a no timer setting.
Yeah, just scrap it.
Cuz yeah, who cares? I mean, if you're playing with friends and you're just like casualing it, who cares? Like if you're missing time. The last thing you want is an AI to take over for your buddy because they had to step away because of something's going on in
And
real
that
life,
happens. We see messages about this.
Yeah, it happens all the time. So I feel like there just needs to be a little bit more flexibility in your options when you're setting up the game and possibly just maybe defaulting the 90 seconds instead to maybe 120 seconds. That'd be fine, probably. I know it makes the games go longer, but it's a complicated board game once you get to the ins and outs of triggers and stuff like that. So I think it's just super necessary, and they're probably already working on it. This is probably a rote point, but it's just something we wanted to mention anyway.
Yeah, and this probably does touch upon because I know this is going to come up in the
Mood point.
comments.
Not road
Um,
point, mood point.
Yeah, that's the one. But yeah, this is going to come in the comments section, and be sure I enjoy looking at the comments of these. It's just responding, but I know this is going to come up, and that is going to be talking about ranked mode and the fact, obviously, that they have clocks, and
Yeah.
people are going to say, well, there's clocks and that. What about in the competitions? And I know this is going to, so I'll address this now. I and I've mentioned this before. I've personally never been the biggest fan of having clocks in big competitions, anyways. If unless there's time constraints physically restricting you. Obviously, the clocks was first introduced when Cheeseville was running the Moadi Melees. There was the one-day competitions. And we did also have a form of clocks at the North Carolina competitions in person. But the reason we had those because we were on time constraints and we had to get games done in a fairly prompt and orderly manner. So games were set basically to 2 hours, or like well, I think it was like 20 minutes per person, sort of thing, something along those lines. And that's fine because you've got those kind of time restrictions that you need to get stuff done in. But when you're playing a bigger online competition, the style that we do, that's not an issue. Like you've got like 6 weeks to play 4 games, for example, and you shouldn't need to have to worry about like if someone spends 3 minutes on a turn. Let them for them 3 minutes on a turn. I couldn't care. Let them spend 5 minutes. I know some people get really annoyed about that, and some people want really quick, snappy games. And if you're playing like a ranked system, that you're playing overall, almost like a league, then I can get like having that in to kind
Mhm.
of keep the pace of game going. And I get that, it's fine, but not getting into the whole like has it helped or hurt the quality of games and person that's beyond the scope of this conversation. I just don't think that the two things for me as the tournament guy is that I would rather people make the best decision they can rather than being time pressured into a suboptimal one. And B, once you start throwing timers at people, you do gradually decrease the accessibility for new players. And that's what you've always got to have in mind as well. And that's why I've never had timers in any of the comps I've run. Because if you've got someone who's kind of still learning the game, working it out, and then they're being asked to join a competition against some really good players, and oh, you've got
Right.
15 minutes for your entire game, like that, people are not going to want a piece of that a lot of the time. They're going to think, maybe this isn't for me right now. And that's the last thing you want.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think that it needs to be more accessible to people, and that people should, like, of all skill levels, should be able to participate in these tournaments. Like, they obviously there's a little bit of a learning curve, and you shouldn't just jump into a tournament if you've never played the game before. But if you're pretty competent with it and you're just getting used to the app, I think that it's totally reasonable that you have extra time, and maybe it's time banks or something like that. If we have a timer, but I'm in favor of during competitions just removing the timer entirely and just playing the game out, like personally.
Where possible, yeah. Especially when you're not like restricted to like having to get several games done in a day. Just let people do what they want. And
Yeah.
if people want to take 3 or 4 minutes on a tricky turn early because they're in a weird spot, let them take that time. I personally, I could care less.
Yep. Yep. Cool. The only other thing I wanted to mention about Dune Digital is the use of bots in online play. It's like obviously if you're playing online and you time out, what happens is you're replaced by a bot, and the bot basically plays at hard mode, but does a lot of stupid things. And you're likely not going to win the game if you turn into a bot unless it's like the last round.
It is better than it used to be.
It
Let's
is
be
better than it
fair
used to be.
here. The bots when the app first came out were wild, I think is the generous term. Even now, they
Yeah.
still do some kind of weird things. But to be fair, like the hard level bots are actually reasonably solid.
Oh yeah, yeah, they are. They
That
are.
they're not that bad. And if you play a game against 3 hard bots, like you will be pushed to have to play half decently to actually win that match.
Right. Well, it's not
Don't.
that the point is not that you're not having fun
Yeah,
playing against
yeah, yeah.
bots. I don't really care. If you want to play against bots, I do that sometimes. It's
Yeah.
fun. But the thing is, in a tournament setting, or if we're going to be hosting a tournament, the last thing we want is to have someone disconnect and not be able to reconnect it, get back reconnected to the game, and then get replaced by a bot. And then it just throws the whole balance of the game off, right? Because this is ultimately about player choice. And if something happens in the world because like a power outage or something, or who knows,
Yeah,
like
we've
they
had
should have
people.
some time. Yeah,
We've
there needs
had
to be some grace period
Yes.
or a save and restart or something
Yeah.
like that.
apologies there. But I was gonna say like we've had people that have played like in our TTS tournaments that are like in Ukraine, and there's a war going over
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And it's like it's wild to me. And I've I had someone in my group was saying, I might have a power outage at any point right now because
Yeah.
there's issues. I'm like, okay, that's fair, and that's a TTS thing for sure.
Yep. Cool. Well, the next thing I want to talk about are other types of like um, tournaments we might want to run. Maybe even with TTS. Obviously, some of these will have to be done on TTS.
Mhm.
But my first one I wanted to say is I would love to do a 3v3 invitational team tournament. I think that that would be just a blast. It would be interesting to see who groups up in teams, and which teams do what. And so, like, I was thinking about how this might look. Like, how would we organize a 3v3 invitational team tournament? I think we'd have to have a smaller bracket, right? Obviously, like maybe
Mhm.
max 16 teams or something like that. That's still like, what, 54
48 people.
people, 48 people, something like that. Yeah, 48 people. That's a lot of people playing. And so we'd have like, in my view, we'd have like the 2 games per team competition. So like team A and team B play 2 games, and then like one as Emperor and one as Fremen each. So they, because there is a little bit of a controversy of whether the Emperor side is too difficult to play as. It's kind of like playing as black in chess. It's
Mhm.
like you're at a disadvantage from the beginning of the game, and so I wonder if that would help alleviate that kind of bias or imbalance. It'd be nice to have both of those played. And obviously, first of all, I want to say this is a massive undertaking if this happens. Like, this is something that this would be taking, it's like 3 to 4 hours per game,
Mm.
right? So it's like 8 hours per matchup. You're looking at for 2 teams to play against each other, which is going to be a lot of logistics, getting people together at the right time to play against each other. I mean, I know that that is possible, but it also seems pretty massively difficult for everybody. So this is kind of like in my, my dreamland of tournaments. I would love to do this. Love to do this. And then ultimately, like the 2 games after they are played, the two scores would be added together, right? And we just have whoever has the highest score at the end wins. But if there's a tiebreaker, we go to like Spice or something like that. So it's a different dynamic. It it plays into a little more politics aspects, right? I mean, we could figure out how communication has to be held. Like, is communication going to be in separate voice chats? Because there's really no way if we're doing this on TTS to police that, right? Like, how can we tell people not to send messages to their friends during a tournament? That's impossible. It's going to happen. So I'm like of the mind that you might as well have the 3 people working on the same team, like working together the whole time, and the other team working together the whole time, just to alleviate that, because there's no way we're going to have everyone chatting in the same room and then not sending each other messages. That doesn't seem very likely to me.
Yeah, team stuff is always different to when you're playing for yourself because it brings, of course, the whole extra dynamic of the fact that there are teams and teams need to speak to each other. And
Yep.
like, it's difficult to just rely on trust and just assume and tell them to say you need to all the conversation you have about this game needs to be over the table. In person, you can do that, not too difficultly, but on the internet, it's basically impossible to police. And you're kind of, what do you do? Do you just kind of go with the trust, knowing that it's going to probably be abused by someone somewhere, or do you try to enforce certain things, knowing that it's kind of paper thin. You can't really do a whole lot about it if someone decides to do it. You can't really win on too much of that side. One thing that's interesting about this though is that I don't seem to recall you always being the hottest on this idea. I could be
Of a
wrong.
3v3. No,
Yeah.
you're right. I haven't been. I think just because it's just a huge deal, like a huge undertaking. I think it'd be, like I said, dreamland. This is kind of like if we could get enough people, maybe even like, I don't know, like 9 teams, like that'd be cool, or 12 teams.
Yeah, it doesn't have
That'd
to
be
be.
really fun. Yeah, I mean, whatever. Something reasonable that lets us have some fun content, showcase the 3v3 for Uprising, which I think is extremely fun and unique. There's no, let me, there are very few games out there that let you play 3 players versus 3 players. Very few. And there are even fewer games that are as tight as Dune Imperium that let you do that. So I think it's an amazing thing that we have in Uprising. And it's also extremely fun to play as like Muad'Dib and the Emperor and things like that. So I I've cooled on it. I think like I was a little bit like, I don't think this is something we should probably do. But maybe if we get enough outcry, enough players out there, if you're interested, listening right now and playing in a Dune Imperium Uprising 3v3 tournament, then let us know in the comments. I mean, let us know if this is something you want to see, something you want to participate in, because it seems something that no one's ever done. We could just throw it out there and see what sticks. So I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, I mean, probably as one off to say you've got a lot more experience than I do, honestly. But I know there are some people that do play it. I know that there are a couple of servers dotted around where they try to organize these games on I don't want to say regular basis. Again, like it is a 3 to 4 hour game, and I highly suspect that in a competition format, those games might even go longer. Again, I'm having horrible cold sweats of Twilight Imperium tournaments where the first round games can sometimes go up to 10 hours.
Yeah.
And wouldn't want to repeat that, mind you, but when you're playing for something in a competition setting, like, yeah, it will be a little bit different, and there is going to be a degree of like organization and such. And like, it would be interesting to watch. I don't know how we would best show a game of it. I don't know if we want to just upload a 4 hour long video. That might not be a particularly good way of doing it. We
I mean,
might
if
have
they
to.
did that, I would commentate over it. I think it's just most interesting, one of the most interesting formats of any Euro I've ever played. I know there's some weird stuff with it, but like when hooks are gained by the Muad'Dib team and stuff like that. But it's very strategic. It's very interesting which accesses your team gets early on, and it does become quite the scramble at the end. So I don't know. I'm for it. We'll see.
Mm.
How about you, Shadow? What would you like to see? What kind of tournament in Dreamland or not?
Uh, Again, as I talked this in the last podcast, actually, in a way, it's a little tricky for me because I'm so used to like running stuff fairly close to rules as written. So I don't really hugely do a whole lot of home brewing. I mean, like we've done technically bits of it because, of course, like there's no official way to draft in this game. Like your leaders, you just kind of left to work it out. So you have to work that out for yourself. We've gone through various ideas of that. Obviously, we do like a pool picking system with some people taken out. Sometimes it's hidden, sometimes it's not. But we've had all sorts of ideas coming through. We've had obviously suggestions about do you do like leader bans, for example, which I didn't really see much point of. You just ban the same leaders basically the whole time.
Yeah.
We've gone through obviously there's the different ideas of how they do it in Doom Digital, where you've got obviously you got the standard, just pick two, get two dealt to you. Best of luck with that. When in North Carolina as well, we did kind of a variant of hidden picks going backwards, which is a little funky and stuff. I don't know. I mean, as far as like actual games as such actual tournaments, I probably the most interesting thing to probably talk about on my side is like messing around with like the thing that I'd be most interested in doing is like messing around with like the Imperium decks. Probably.
Yeah.
I think that's probably an easier ground to look at, and there's a couple in particular that bring up. I know you've uploaded a video regarding like your collection of stuff, your own actual personal, whatever you want to call it.
A custom set. Yeah.
That's the one. As English is getting incredibly hard for me, I do apologize.
Yeah. So just has gone up now. As we're talking on the 15th, my custom Uprising Dune set is, you can check it out. Basically, all the cards that I have in my custom set. We have specifically banned some leaders like Tessia, Baron, and Ekaz are not available, but and obviously the ones that use the X track are not available as well. Those kinds of leaders, but it's pretty open. And check that video out if you're interested. Let me know what you think about it. If you're interested in trying it out, I have included a link to the file, and the file you can just drag into, it's a JSON. You can drag it into your TTS saves, not saves.
Ooh.
You can just drag it in. There's an explanation. You
Yeah.
can drag it in there and try it out. So easy peasy. Just put it into a game and play with it. So,
You have been busy.
um, yeah. So there's that, and yeah, I think it's a really fun set. Some of it is inspired by some of my other friends' sets. So, yeah, it's meant to kind of showcase more of what I think each faction's specialties are, and make you feel a little bit more like a unique player. Like you have something unique that no one else has. Um, and I know that does exist already, but there's some things that I think Uprising is a little bit more. I don't know how to put this. Like it's everything's very similar, but you do have like one or two outlier cards that are very very strong.
We'll get
Um,
to that. Don't worry. We'll
anyway,
get.
anyway, but
Um,
but yeah. So that's the point of that. More good stuff, less bad stuff. I don't say bad stuff, less powerful stuff, I guess.
yeah. I suppose
Yeah,
the other thing that's similar to that, of course, and I imagine will also come in comments if we don't talk about it, is Paul Dennon's homebrew.
yeah.
His custom set, which is of course partially, I assume, where you got the basis. I'm assuming to kind of like put together what you did.
Yeah. So I mean, I looked at Paul's list. I think Paul's list is very good. He was focusing on sort of a thematic Dune Uprising, where you take everything that from the old sets and bring them in, but those only the cards that are related to the second movie. So like anything that related to the pre Paul at the Fremen part of the movie, like is gone. So like Leto dying, he's not in the game, sort of thing. I personally don't care. I like playing with Leto in Uprising. Actually, I think it's one of the better leaders in
He's,
Uprising.
I imagine he's very strong in
He's
Uprising.
yeah, he's very good. I still think there's some reason to take out the Baron. I don't play with the Baron, just simply because his double bump is pretty amazing still, even if it's
Hmm.
difficult to do. The one problem with him is like because of tendencies of players to go Fremen and then like spacing early, he insta gets the money space. Like like in the games I played with him, he will get a refinery like round one,
Yeah,
and
because no one
that's
else is
really
going there.
bad. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
you
just
don't want him to get
farming
the money.
matrix. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So and so that's kind of a reason to keep him out. But Tessia is the biggest culprit here. Like Tessia is the worst in Uprising simply because her track climbing is just head and heels above
This
everyone
this is
else's.
this is why I seem to recall we were messing around with Paul Dennon's homebrew in North Carolina, and it was a game you played where I think you were Tesia and you got Throne directorship.
Was
Was
that
it
me? No, I think that was
or you
Seven
were or you
Spirits.
were in a game? Was some I noticed there was a game where someone had Tesia and got Throne directorship, and it was a complete and utter blowout.
I can't remember. Yeah, it's a good. I might have had Tessia, or maybe Sean had Baron. It was one of the top two, like those leaders. And I remember, I don't think I got Chom directorship, but I think Sean did, and he basically got Chom and won round six with Tessia or Baron. I can't remember which one he had.
With
He
little
can
competition, yeah.
confirm in the comments if he listens to this podcast. But basically, yeah, those two are very very strong. They're not as strong with my custom set because there's more stuff that lets you climb tracks. So that kind of balances it a little bit, but I still think that they're slightly above curve, and I don't think it's necessary to play with them anymore. Just play with other people. Play. You know what? You know who's really good in Uprising? Memnon. He's really good. Getting an extra bump for free for doing a thing you usually do is great.
I mean,
Um,
be fair, I imagine he's actually not that bad
he's
in
not.
Uprising. I've never seen him before, but I imagine because it's the closest thing to base game. You know, in base game, Memnon is, as I've said, is not actually that bad. He's totally fine. It's just that when X came out and then Immortality came out, it's so heavily eclipsed by everything else around him that it's just like, yeah, whatever. But yeah, imagine
Yeah.
Uprising, the loose spice generation is not bad. It gets you to like early espionage and stuff like that. I think he's probably solid for that.
Yeah. Yeah. He's decent. Gets you to the espionage space. That's a very very important thing to do.
Hmm.
yeah, I mean it's a fun set. Have fun with it. It's meant to just be there for people to play with. But post your specific sets or things you'd like to see in the set. There's some things I definitely didn't put in there that I think are probably
Yeah,
controversial.
this this
Um,
this this is what I wanted to get onto next. I think this is a very good point because I imagine you put a load of stuff into your set. What did you take out?
we're not playing with. Well, I'll tell you what I'm not playing with from the base set that I was very sad to not put in, but there's an actual specific reason for it. So I'm not playing with the voice. It's one of my favorite cards from
I am
Uprising.
mortally offended. I don't think we can be friends anymore.
Well, here's the thing. So please don't. No, we're gonna need to be friends. So yeah, the voice is a great card that lets you block a space off, right? And one of the problems with having the voice with Uprising is that there are actually fewer spaces that you can access from the get go.
Mhm.
Um, Specifically, you don't have Mentat available early on to like kind of jump over it. You don't have like I guess some of the spaces like the deep desert is harder to get to. That you just have fewer options. And so the way that Uprising gets around those fewer options is that you have spies, and that lets you plan your turnout better. And while I like the idea of blocking someone's movement while they have a spy there ready to go, it feels a little bit too feel bad to me. And when I played with it, I didn't actually like what it was doing. It didn't really like warp the game or anything. I just think it's just doing something I didn't want that set to do. Um, and I still wanted to keep spies open. I still want that to be a thing. So I cut the voice. I missed that. There's no Chom directorship as well,
Yeah.
which makes a lot of sense. Getting 4 bumps for 8 persuasion is pretty massive. The other 8s are then in there. I like them a lot, but that's the only one I think that's the only one I didn't put in.
Hmm.
From Uprising, there is no Guild Spy.
Yeah. I
I
we
don't
we
play
have
with
to
that
have
card.
we have to have this conversation. You know we have to have this conversation.
Yeah, I know. I don't like the card very much. I think it's just kind of I don't know. After a while, when you've played against somebody who has Guild Spy, you just kind of feel like again. You know what I mean? It's like I have to do this thing again. I have to go block these things again. It's like come on. It feels a little boring, and I kind of like um, I like the idea of the card, and I don't think it's like a completely broken card. I just think it's kind of boring, and I like other things about the card. I like the idea that it gives you a spy. I don't think it should cost 3. You should choose a track and get a bump with it, like 1 track. That'd be fine. I have no problem with that. But like that, you can get like 3 to 4. I guess 3, right? You can only get 3. Since you can get 3 bumps with 1 reveal, it's just too much. Like it doesn't happen that much, but when it does, it's a little bit too debilitating. Um, yeah, it's like in design, it's like it's the edge case, the edge case, the very furthest edge case of something you would not want to have happen. So it's like, okay, too much, too much. Let's pull it back a little bit, right? It doesn't happen that much, but it can happen. Um, I did leave in. What did I leave in? I left in Strike Fleet. I think I've left in Strike Fleet, even though that's a card that I have had some issues with in the past.
Hmm.
I think that it's incredibly powerful, uh, but I added a lot more ways to counterbalance that in the game. There are a lot more ways to generate troops on agent and reveal actions. There are more combat cards in the intrigue deck generally. And so I don't think it's as big of a deal because basically what it did is it ended up making you corner the market, so to speak, on troop generation. And if you could just like wait and throw in 3 + 1 + 2, 6 troops with 1 action just because you retreated, you recalled your
You
spy,
just win the
felt
fight.
bad. Yeah, it felt bad. And so it doesn't feel that bad anymore, mostly because a lot of the derpy intrigue cards are gone. The ones that give you like 1 troop, or the ones that like give you a contract. They're just like not deeply impactful for a game where you need the intrigue cards to help pull you back into the game.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And so like the game and the design of this set was to help um, lower the bar for that rubber banding, make that rubber banding come back a little bit, because it's gone in Uprising. There's like the fourth place player is so far behind, the third place player is like 3 or 4 points behind, and the second place player might be like 2 to 3 points behind, but like there's no way for you to come back because there's a lot of gatekeeping that some of the intrigue cards do. Like if you get something that is completely useless, it's not necessarily a bad thing to have a completely useless card in specific situations because it'll be useful in other situations. But in a lot of cases, what you're expecting the intrigue deck to do is to help get you back into the game in some way. It's like, oh, it's a combat card. Okay, I can try to win this combat. Or, oh, it's a bump card. Or, oh, it's something that draws me some cards that gets me Spice Mist Flows. Or, you know, those sorts of things. Like you're expecting it to help you generate momentum. And if the card doesn't generate you momentum, I cut it from that deck. So it's a mixture of lots of stuff. I also tried to emphasize things like the unload effects. I really love unload. And so I've included as many as I could that weren't involved with Ixian tech stuff. You know, I wanted to have, actually, there's a couple cards I wanted to include, but I just couldn't because they had tech negotiators on them. And I'm like, wow, this card would be so good for this custom set because it lets you buy, you know, what was it? The Ix Guild Compact that lets you, yeah, I love that card. So fun.
It's a much better card, people reckon. Great ECAS card, by the way. Really
great ECAS card. Really fun card. But because it has the unload effect for the tech negotiators, I couldn't do it. It's too bad because I wanted to include that card so bad just so you can like generate some more dreadnoughts out of character for an Uprising game and have some dreadnoughts. It'd be fun. Anyway, take a look at it if you're interested. I'd be interested in doing a tournament with a custom deck. Maybe not this specific custom deck, maybe Paul's custom deck or something like that. But I would be interested in hosting that. That'd be fun. I think that people would have fun with that, and it might be a little bit less stressful. You know, we could bring back the atomics, perhaps. Like I think atomics is pretty necessary. I don't know if you have to do it with my set. I kind of think it's okay. You can choose to do it, but I don't like playing with it. But I think it's a totally reasonable thing, and it kind of varies game to game when my friends want to play with that token or not. So
yeah, I mean, I can get that. For me, it's kind of, I can give or take atomics. Like it feels a bit of a necessary evil when you're playing with Ixanimo, but like the times where someone just like absolutely crazy high rolls, it does feel pretty bad. And that's not too great. But yeah, I think the only thing I'd add to that, like obviously I mentioned about it as well. Like so when we had our Uprising competition early on in the year. Obviously, something that I was keeping a close eye on over the course of the competition was how well some cards were doing. It was our first chance to kind of have a load of games being publicly viewable. And so there was a lot of focus on stuff, like Strike Fleet, on Gurney Halleck, for example. But of course, there was a lot of focus on Guild Spy. And yeah, like it did a lot of damage, especially once it got to like the knockout sort of format. I think Guild Spy came up a few times, and there was some times it kind of just warped the game a bit. So, and I know that some people afterwards that there has it's something that comes up. It is the Talaxu Master of Uprising, and rightly so because they're both like pretty game warping cards when they're rocking and rolling. And it's so awkward. I do agree. I think the idea behind it is good. I think like the design is interesting, but it's just too good at what it does. And I feel like as and when X Uprising competition comes up, that probably is a question that might well be actively asked about participants: is do we use it or not? Because like there are times where it doesn't do a whole lot, but it's like when it comes up, and I mean, we had like a Staban player or something like that. I know we had some games that was a Staban, so that was like kind of a long way behind. Got Guild Spy, got the spies on the factions quickly, and it just ran away at the game, stuff like that. And that it's personal preference where you can like that or not. So I feel like if there was gonna be any change, like deck wise, especially in a more big competition where it's a bit more difficult to have wholesale changes. That's probably the one card that has to have, I think, legitimately be considered. And it's one of those ones that's like, I think with anything, like if you take out one card, I don't think it's the bigger deal because it's one card. Like it's just, it's like when Talaxia Master was out for Iximo, and like I think the problem with that is because there was two of them. And that was
Yeah,
the
that is a
issue.
problem.
That
Yeah.
was the issue, is there was two of them, and that was like really compounding the issues. If you only had one amongst a deck of like 110, 120 cards, then it doesn't really matter at that point too much. And even you could say, well, Guild Spy is only one of those out of like 60 cards over itself. And you know what, you're right. But when it comes, and especially when it comes out early, like in the opening row, and it's just like there is some crazy stuff. I mean, we had people legitimately insta revealing round one for Guild Spy in a competition, and that's wild. Again, if it's good or not, I guess is your personal preference. But I feel like that's the one thing that would have to be legitimately thought about, and I would have to legitimately consider whether I would include that or not, because I don't know. We'll cross that
Yeah.
bridge when we get there.
Yeah, I think it's a fair conversation for the community to have, just like the um, master for immortality. I think it's not as egregious of an issue as Talaxu Master. Talaxu Master had the best reveal of any card, and it cost 5. You know, the problem with that was that people were simply just like atomixing to try to find it because it was
Yes,
so warping.
yes,
Or to even if you missed and you had like, you know, you got Surgeon. Surgeon was also pretty warping. There are a lot of warping cards in Immortality that I obviously I you can't include those in my custom set or anything like that, but I wouldn't want to include them even if I could, because they change not just the temperature of the game, but they change what the game is. And I don't really want that to happen. Like I like the game the way it is. I don't want to have to play the, oh, all right, well, let's try to get the Tleilaxu Master game, the mini game, or let's try to put all our spies on the faction tracks before the person who has Guild Spy, before they do that, so that they don't run away with it. Like those sorts of things are kind of annoying to me, and I think that there's nothing wrong with strong cards, and there's nothing wrong with OP cards even. There's nothing wrong with cards that have that kind of game warping effect, provided that I'd say they don't become the focus of the game. So anyway, yeah, I'd be in favor of cutting that from the deck if we just played like Uprising. I'd also say like I think we should probably include some cards from base game or Ix, some fun cards that just I think, and you can check my custom set. Again, I've ranted too long about this, but check my custom set video about it. But there's some cards that I just felt like I was missing, and they had to do with like there's variants in Uprising that do similar things, but they don't really cover the same bases. They don't do the same thing or fill the same roles. Like for instance, there's a really great card that's I think it's a plot card that says buy a card that costs 3 or less for free, right?
Oh,
And
this
if you
is yeah, I know the one.
right, and if you have a worm in the combat, it goes to your hand. Now I have to say that card is really good. I like that card a lot. There's nothing wrong with that card. Um, for like my custom set, I did not include it, and the reason I did is because I wanted to have the 2 persuasion intrigue card, because the card that gives you 3 persuasion to put a thing into your hand won't help you buy a Spice Flow. It won't help you catch up. It just gets you. It's kind of a mid to early game card, but it's really hard to get worms in the combat. It's unreliable early, and so it's this weird card that is like this really cool flavor, and I like what it does, but it's not doing what the intrigue deck I think is supposed to do. If that makes sense, it's like I think the intrigue deck is supposed to play like it's supposed to plug holes in what isn't working for you, and it's supposed to give you some ideas and pathways to winning the game. And I just don't think that card does that. It doesn't do anything specific that helps you. It might help you buy Spice Must Flows if you have a worm in the combat, because you can pull a 2 persuasion card to your hand. That's the best it can do. But the gatekeeping of that card of having worms in combat, I feel is too much tilted toward the player who is already winning the game. Because if you have worms and you're just like churning through stuff and getting extra resources, you're already ahead. So that's my problem with that kind of card. So like cards that reward worms, I don't like those, because worms are a reward. They double your rewards.
Mm.
Like so anyway, but that's me. So I'd like to see some of those classic cards like Guild Envoy, some of those cards that I feel plugged those holes um, in the Imperium deck. Like cards, you have a lot of like desert and blue cards out there. Oh, maybe I can find this, Guild Envoy that lets me like get around that and get my influence that way. Like there's ways for this to work, but in the Uprising Imperial or Intrigue deck, I just don't think that there are those kinds of catch up cards. I think there's lots of like I have more, so I get more
Yeah,
cards.
there's a lot of that, and to be fair, that I think that's slight divergence, but something that is relevant to talk about. Like Uprising is kind of a game sometimes where it can be very win more. Instead of like, yeah, like I think that's a lot of its design, especially with something like Worms, for example. Worms are not a catch-up mechanic. Worms are
Yeah,
you get in first, you get a ton of stuff, and you use that to win the game. And that is kind of what it is realistically. There's a lot of win more in Uprising, and we do talk about it as well. Like if you we talked about in the last podcast as well, actually, about the fact like if you make like a couple of really poor moves early in the game, it can be near impossible to catch up. Because of the way that Uprising is like, it's just Uprising. It's a very cutthroat, kind of brutal game sometimes where you get punished heavily for making not even errors sometimes, just kind of inaccuracies, and they can just spiral. So I think that's a decent demonstration of that.
yeah. And I don't want to sound like I'm being super critical about Uprising. I really like Uprising. It's just that, there's some things that for me, and this again, I've already said this is a me thing, but there's some things I miss. I'm nostalgic for 2 years ago. Like some of those things that came out of base game and Ix were just so amazingly, uh, like complementary to the rest of the game that I miss those sorts of things. So
And if you would like to hear us being exceptionally critical about Uprising, check out our review that we did a few months ago.
yeah, yeah.
Cheap plug there.
All right, let's move on. Did you have any other tournaments you're interested in seeing, perhaps, or things we might want to do in the future?
One just to throw out, because I'm curious to see what your reactions this is going to be. Uprising competition, Worms only double win first place rewards, not second or third.
Oh,
Discuss.
I love it. I love that idea. I really do. Yeah.
This is something that I think we've kind of thrown about, and I mean, actually, I think we talked about this in passing on the review that we did, but I don't think we've really had ever like a serious sort of discussion about like actually implementing that and why we would perhaps want to implement that. Again, talk about the kind of the win more thing, perhaps. But yeah, that's what I want to throw at you. Worms only double first place rewards, not second or third.
Oh, I love it. Actually, I think the idea that they're more of a gamble that you have to kind of commit in, to a pot that you might not win feels more like Dune, feels more like base game and Ix. Again, I've been critical of things like the Worms doubling second place and third place rewards. I just don't like that. I just don't know why. It's just me. But I
Especially
would love
stuff
to
like
play.
Protect the Sieges, for example. Second place. Oh, what a shame! You only get 6 spice and 2 troops.
Yeah,
Or the shipping one. Oh, what a shame! I get 4 troops and 2 water and 16,000 victory points. I'm going to generate from all these resources I'm getting
yeah,
from this second place. There are legitimately situations where I've seen people will deliberately try not to win it because they don't want the contracts. They want the second place rewards, which just doesn't feel right to me,
right,
and I
right.
just that I just it doesn't feel very Dune like to be deliberately going for second place and not actively trying to win. That seems really strange to me.
Right, right, right. No, I think that they're, that bidding games, which is what the combat is in Dune, bidding games can have that kind of nuance where you think where the second place reward is better than the first. There are lots of games that do that. Um, I just, yeah, I agree with you that I think it's just sort of a little weird in this setting. Like, it should be a winner takes all kind of thing, I feel. But, I mean, again, I'd love to play a tournament and I'd love to host a tournament where Worms only double first place rewards. I think that would be really interesting to try out. I think I'd like to play a couple of games with that ahead of time to see how I like it. And then I could go crazy and make a video about why you should be playing Dune Uprising this way, and completely like derail our relationship with Direwolf Digital. No, but I'm just
Sorry,
saying
Scott.
like Oh, sorry. No, I think that there's a lot of interesting stuff that you can do, especially homebrew with Uprising. And I think that's a great way to kind of like to start. I think if you're interested, just try it out, see what happens. Like,
I think
does it feel better to you? Does it feel worse? Let us know if you've done it.
I think the nice thing about it is, well, it's just one rule tweak as well. Like, it's just one. It's not messing around with the deck. It's not messing around with the construction of the game or anything like that. It's one rule tweak, which I think is very like easy to manage and to kind of idealize and get your head around as well. It's not overly complicated. And I imagine there must have been some TTS games that have played somewhere where people have like done this and given it a spin. I feel like someone somewhere must have tried it. But I think if there was one thing I would change on Uprising outside of getting rid of Guild Spy, it would be, and I think is a more creative and playful one would be, yeah, only doubling the win and rewards. I think would definitely put a lot more peril in combat, no doubt about that.
Yeah, agreed. My last thing I wanted to talk about in the last potential tournament I'd like to see run would be an Uprising X Immortality Chaos tournament. That is, including all the leaders, everything. Just like, let's throw it all in and just see what people can do with it. Because I think, now I played it a couple times actually with everything, and it's pretty nuts. It's honestly pretty nuts and pretty sandboxy, but it does lean a little bit too heavily, in my opinion, on those yellow symbols and making those yellow symbols kind of work for you. Like I think the the immortality research track is still too strong for this setting. I think Uprising, you can kind of ignore. I think it's okay to ignore worms. I think that's fine. It lets you ignore worms, you know, it lets you just jam tracks. But the biggest problem I've had with this specifically is that, and I think it'd be fun to try maybe like a mini tournament or something like that. But I don't think I'd be able to take this very seriously. Is that with Ix and Immo and Uprising, you get to the top of the track really fast of each of the faction tracks, and that doesn't feel like Uprising because you'll have a lot of rewards. You'll have a lot of rewards on combats that will then be completely moot. Like they don't do anything. Like, oh, that double bump with the Bene Gesserit. Well, so and so is already at the top. Like,
Yeah, not doing a whole
what's
lot.
the point? Then everyone goes for the second place reward. You know, then it becomes a little bit of a like who can rush to the bottom fastest, and I don't think that's quite good. But that said, like again, this is like chaos tournament. Like if you were gonna try like Uprising X Immo and do something like competitively, you just see all sorts of wacky stuff happen. People winning rounds 5, like, you know, Thylaxu Master, Gola, and like, I don't know, you know, could you even, oh yeah, you could double, so you could Gola double Strike Fleet, couldn't you?
Oh
Yeah, you
my
totally could.
god.
Can you
Oh,
imagine
well,
that?
no, I mean, would you? Oh no, yeah, it would work because
Yeah, you could.
the spy recall would count for both agent cards. We've had that
Yeah.
confirmed by Paul Denon. So one spy recall for six.
6 troops plus 2 you could throw in. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, that's what I'm
What's
saying. This would be chaos, right? Like, you might as well at this point like just include all the cards.
Yeah,
you know?
I think I would just throw everything and just say have fun. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
this is your universe. You've decided to opt into this carnage. You now have to live with your life decisions.
yeah, yeah.
You know, at that
People
point,
would
like,
have fun. Yeah.
you know, I mean, at that point, you might as well have Guild Spy back in. What the hell, right?
Oh yeah, you would totally, because it's a one in what 156 or 170 or
It's
whatever.
like,
How
yeah,
many cards there are?
exactly. Exactly. And yeah, you just basically just chuck it all in. It would be a spectacle. Um, it would make for some very strange stuff. There would definitely be some incredibly one-sided matches. But I think there'd be just as many that are just like completely wild, and you just don't really know what's really going on. I can't imagine like trying to play in it in a way because there's just so much to keep track of and what's going on. I think my only concern with it would be that because there's so many different things going on, that there might not actually be that much player interaction in a
Yeah.
way, because everyone's kind of doing their own thing. You know, one person's going towards shipping, one person at least is focusing on getting their Talaxi track going, one of them's going factions, one of them's going worms. You just can't physically do everything at the same time. And that's not even counting some of the wacky stuff that you could find. Stuff like In the Shadows, for example, seems like insane. On that, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. Definitely, I think it'd be an interesting. There's no doubt, and I know that there is some efforts going on with the rank system for Uprising. Oh no, the for XMO, I believe, and like trying to introduce a couple of Uprising leaders that way round.
Yeah, that's
And of
cool.
course, which is ongoing and such. Yeah, it depends basically. That again, you wouldn't be able to do that and like have a serious. I wouldn't be going and saying let's have a $20,000 tournament with everything because it'd
No.
just be a complete. You might as well just go take 20,000 to the casino and just play craps for several hours. At that point, truth be told, but it's an interesting. It would be a spectacle. I think that is the most polite and politically correct term that I could use for an all-in tournament like that.
Yeah, yeah. But you know what? It'd be talked about for a while because of all the wacky things that would happen. There might be people might get tired. I think it'd have to be a short tournament. People would get tired of it after a
You
while. It'd
wouldn't
have
be
to
able
be
to do
like,
it long. Oh
yeah,
no,
yeah,
oh no, it
yeah.
would be very, very short form.
Exactly. I probably have it as you win and you're in to the next round, not like group stages is simply like a bracket, like the World Series of Board Gaming does for their tournament. It's like you win, you go to the next stage. Like
Yeah,
I wouldn't want more than like I don't know, 4 rounds of this. Honestly,
yeah. Any
it'd be
more on that,
fun, but
and your
man,
head does start to hurt, even just thinking
yeah,
about it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, Uprising. I would also like to do an Uprising Immortality tournament because I actually think Uprising Immortality is much more balanced together than with Ix. I think the shipping track does some wonky things to Uprising, whereas
Mm.
I think Immortality has more of a slow burn to it, and it feels like the generating of momentum through that research track. It like culminates right around rounds 5 and 6 when you get those bot cards from the Tleilaxu row finally back into your hand. You get to utilize those, and you're trying to cycle them as fast as possible. Those sorts. It feels like that progression might be, and I know in my play of it, it was. I've only played it once with Uprising and Immortality, but it felt good. I mean, it felt like a really good thing to try and to do more of because they seemed complementary, those two.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, let's say you've had experience of playing Uprising, the expansions. I don't really have a whole lot to talk about, truthfully, as far experience wise. I've theory crafted. Of course, we've talked about it on this podcast. We've talked about another one, talked about it in our review. We'd obviously talked about the backwards compatibility. I think I would be more inclined to play Uprising with the Immortality expansions than it's just because again shipping. Like we know it's very strong, and especially in an uprising world, and the way that the troops are used and how valuable they are, and obviously the bumps you get. If anyone could like get access to like a lot of that, you think that some got like Chome Delegate and guaranteed shipping access every round, basically
Yeah,
on Uprising, Rise of X. I mean, that feels like that's a landslide waiting to happen,
yeah,
and could get very ugly very very quickly. So I think as much as I'm slightly hesitant about having experimentation cards going to basins and generating worms to fight at the same time, I suppose the counteraction would be, well, the first two basins would be very choke pointed early, and also like it's a lot harder to get to Haga Basin, or not Haga Basin, or Great Flat, because now it's deep desert and it costs you free water, so you're not going to be going there to particularly to fund your experimentation cards. So I
no, but you
do.
got contracts. I mean, that's you still got the
Yeah, your
accept
contract card as
contract.
well. Yeah, obviously. And I think that's also probably less of a problem. I think that was the issue as well with XMO sometimes. Experimentations could also get you shipping. And that was
Right.
kind of overdrive. And I think that was where like that could get a little bit uneven sometimes if someone was able to dominate that because they just had the card draw was just going their way, for example, which does sometimes happen. So yeah, I think definitely that if I was to do anything uprising, I could be talked into that. Just going with immortality, and just kind of see how it goes until someone pulls like double Talaxi Master, and I hate my life.
It has happened to me.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. I
Definitely
think we
feels bad.
I think most of us have had a game where someone's got double TM, and they've generally not gone well.
That's the funny thing about Teleximaster though is that even when somebody has it, it doesn't. It makes me feel like, all right, well, I guess they just have this better engine than I do. I
Yeah.
guess I have to focus on something else. So it never felt like I was completely out of it, although it did at the end when somebody like ends up at the end of the track round 4 and is just like churning through cards. That's rough, man.
Yeah, that's a bad.
Anyway,
But yeah.
no more talk about that. No more talk about that. Um, Among these different tournaments we just talked about, do you have one you're most excited to try out, or one you'd be most excited to run?
Yeah, I think I can't. Maybe trying to organize and run a 3v3 team competition sounds like a bit of a nightmare. And trying to schedule that sounds like an experience that I would need to be paid more money for, probably.
Yeah,
Obviously, we've talked about the Xtone and Dune Imperium Digital, which would be interesting. It probably wouldn't be actually that far different for me. It's just hosting the games on a different platform, and also like having to deal with like result verification, which I don't think would be that different, truth be told. I think like messing around the deck is definitely something we could definitely do. Though that would have to be obviously via TTS, and then we'd have to have specific files, making sure they're being used for that. And inevitably, there's going to be a game somewhere where someone just boots the normal file, and then no one realizes until like 3 turns in, like, oh wait, we've got a problem. And I'm like, great, start again.
yep. Well,
But
that's how it works. I mean,
yeah,
we are playing with Tabletop Simulator, which is not the easiest thing to use, and we don't expect everyone is what will be an expert in it.
no,
So,
no.
yeah,
But yeah, I think all of the above like have some pros and probably some cons as well. From an
sure.
organizational standpoint, there's no question about that. But it kind of depends what you want. If you just want complete bedlam in your games, yeah, just chuck everything in. If you want to have a bit more of a brinkmanship sort of experience, maybe Uprising and like having worms only double the winning combat rewards might be an interesting way to do it. It gives people as well. I think the one thing with that, and I suggest it is, it also gives people more reason to fight against worms
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well, because it doesn't feel too great sometimes to like stop someone winning a combat with a worm, because they still get a bucket ton of resources in the second. So you think it's not really worth it. But if they suddenly that gets completely blunted and they've taken the gamble and you're able to thwart that, like that can be very, very damaging potentially. And again, your margin is going to vary on. So I think there's some interesting ideas here, and I imagine we'll get a world of different experiences and responses from people that listen to them.
yeah, absolutely. That's okay. That's why we do these things. Yeah, for me, I think I would like to do the Dune Digital tournament the most. I think that system is just very clean. It's very easy for people to see what's going on. I think commentating it would be pretty easy as well because of the way like the agents are animated to specific locations and the way it shows how cards are bought from the row. I really like that. Everything's just there. And so I'd like to do that the most. Honestly, the thing I want to actually have, I want to host the most is the 3v3 tournament. I think that actually is really exciting for me right now. I'm kind of getting back into, I want to do more 3v3, like big group games myself. And so, like, I really, really would like to see some really interesting, creative 3v3 play and see what the best of the best could do when they're given that kind of freedom. Um, so yeah, that's for me. I really like all the other ideas too. I'm not opposed to any of them. The Uprising Immortality, I think probably not. Even the Uprising Ix and the Chaos Tournament would be really fun. Again, like I said, quick, probably like get it done in a day kind of thing. Maybe it could be a Muad'Dib melee, you know, if Cheesable's interested, and I don't think he's got the time right now. But the yeah, maybe that. And I like the idea that you had with worms doubling only first place rewards, which I've probably mentioned on this channel or a podcast before that I thought that's how it originally worked.
Yes.
Like when I first like read the rules, I thought that's what happened, and then I had to reread it saying like, oh no, all rewards. Like, oh,
I
wow,
think,
that's interesting.
and I think a few people have seen when we've had the first come on North Carolina, we first got a Hands Up Rising. There was a few people that were like, "Oh wait, it's doing all rewards." I know there was a few people that were like, "Oh okay," and they didn't realize that at first either. So because I imagine some people would imagine, well, it just doubles when you wins, because that's not a totally illogical way of looking at it. So, but no, it's everything. So, it's been
Yeah.
interesting. Anyways,
Well, I mean that's all I have for today. That's sound good to you?
yeah, it's good enough for myself until we next reconvene. I get
All
used
right.
to like having this bracket out every week now, sort of thing. We are gonna, if you are a again, another cheap plug here. But if you're on the council for the Patreon, you're going to be getting very regular messages of polls and saying, what do you want us to do next? Because we're going to be cycling through these at a fairly quick rate of knots at the moment, and that is definitely the idea. So, something to look forward to there.
Yeah. And then until then, everybody, we will see you on the next one. Take care.
Have a good one.